BuzzFeed is a self-styled news and entertainment digital media platform, perhaps as infamous as it is famous, and perhaps that infamy has helped it stand out in a crowded marketplace, like a man with a megaphone and a stutter. But what is BuzzFeed, and why in some corners is it so reviled? BuzzFeed is a very big organisation, and its content spans not only its own website, but YouTube and social media. And from what I can tell, it's been very popular to hate on BuzzFeed for many years. But chiefly the reasons that people hated it a few years ago was that BuzzFeed plagiarised people. It plagiarised other websites and random people on the internet by taking lists, funny photographs and screen grabs, and not only using them without permission, but not even giving credit. Just to be clear, the content I'm talking about, which I'll go into later, isn't protected by fair use. It isn't somebody finding a weird picture of a dog in a leotard and making a comment about bizarre animal abuse. It isn't satire. It's just someone ripping off a funny photo they found somewhere else and putting it onto BuzzFeed because it will garner traffic. 7 facts freshers didn't know about college life. You won't believe these celebrity crimes. 9 times Robert McNamara was right about corn. You get the idea. Titles and thumbnails that attract people with 30 seconds to spare who don't want to use those 30 seconds thinking about things. 8 faces Alec Baldwin can make with his back fat, or worrying about the essay I haven't started. Famously, these sort of titles would lead to very low quality content. Stuff that obviously has been shoved out as quickly as possible, and would get the traffic it needed because of the titles. These things would keep people there for a few seconds, maybe a minute. Usually these types of articles, popularly called shitposts, but the phrase "this is so bad it's like a BuzzFeed article" might be more prevalent now, would be lists, often with photographs that belong to somebody else. Now, it's been pointed out before that BuzzFeed would often give the source for photographs used, or even for entire articles, as Facebook or Snapchat or even BuzzFeed. Essentially, BuzzFeed couldn't be bothered to find out where their appropriated content had come from, and they'd just give the credit to the first person they found who'd ripped it off from somewhere else, and they in turn had ripped it off from. All of these things, plagiarism, clickbait, low effort, low quality content, still exist on BuzzFeed. In fact, they're really the backbone of BuzzFeed. But the website has changed over the years, so that it's less reliant on finding pictures that belong to other people, and it does attribute sources now. But what has happened is their get it out now attitude to web content has moved to providing lists of funny tweets and quizzes. I think their move into making more articles about tweets and articles which are just lists of tweets shows just how cynical they are. They know that tweets are in the public domain, and that people are probably going to be less uppity if BuzzFeed uses some of their tweets rather than if they use some of their photographs. And so too, they know that if they use someone's tweets and they have an objection, they're less likely to be able to do something about it. Now, if that's all BuzzFeed was, a crap website that was used by people who found it by accident, or people who were stuck in an elevator and Candy Crush wouldn't load, I wouldn't bother. But these days it's so much more than that. In 2011, Ben Smith, journalist of the New York Daily and Politico, was hired by BuzzFeed as its editor-in-chief. Under him, BuzzFeed News expanded, and it covers a variety of real journalism topics, as well as occasionally reverting to lists, kind of like the ones you might see in the Daily Mail. Is BuzzFeed News biased? Well, I think probably yes, but I also think a lot of that depends on the writer in question. It does have newsworthy stories that it handles with some objectivity and just gives the facts of. And really, when BuzzFeed News isn't giving an opinion, it's kind of akin to something like Reuters. Now, sometimes it does make political assumptions, and sometimes, of course, it does lean one way or the other, but it is journalism. Of course, in January 2017, BuzzFeed released a 35-page dossier about Donald Trump that most other news organizations wouldn't touch because the content in the dossier was unverified. I think in legal terms it would be called conjecture. Now, I'm not saying the content in the dossier was true or not, but that BuzzFeed didn't know either.
Let's say I had an unverified document given to me by one of your enemies claiming that you had committed a sex crime. And let's say that document was in the hands of law enforcement, but they had not pressed charges against you. Let's say I had no evidence at all that it was true.
That's a good way to look at it. I think that would be, you should not publish that document if you have it. I think if it was briefed to the President of the United States, if it was if members of the Senate were sending out press releases making kind of dark intimations about it, but not saying it, and then it was reported that there was a document that, as you described, it referred to certain crimes, but that we're not going to show you the document, I think I would probably say, I think this is BS, but show them the document, but and let people see the thing that is being referred to.
I do think, though, that BuzzFeed is a much more cynical organisation than it is political. Ben Smith, in the entirety of the interview with Tucker Carlson, who, by the way, I in no way endorse, didn't really defend releasing the information very well at all. I think he knew it wasn't really in keeping with industry standards. I think the release of the dossier was more about a win than any particular story. I think Ben Smith is probably anti-Trump by his own admission, and that's his political stance to take. But I also think that he is acutely aware that his audience is anti-Trump too. Obviously, you can criticise BuzzFeed News. I think sometimes it does have an agenda, and I think that's mostly dependent on the writer. When it deals with international or national news that isn't very political, I think usually it does handle itself in a very journalistic way. I think BuzzFeed News is the strongest arm of BuzzFeed. Now we enter the place which generates the caustic reaction many have to BuzzFeed, the place where its real bias lies, its entertainment section. And I have to say, its mixing of entertainment and actual news on its front page is kind of weird. I guess that's why this is the bizarre summary, but really this discredits both its news and entertainment. Going back to the same interview with Tucker Carlson, and with the caveat that Ben Smith is not in charge of these lists.
Here are some recent BuzzFeed articles. Here are the headlines. 17 foods white people have ruined. White people are a plague to the planet. 21 things white people ruined in 2015. 29 things white people ruined. 36 white people who need to be stopped.
So many things, my God.
Join the revolution, stop the white people. Now, I know this is like a sort of cutesy Brooklyn way of demonstrating you're not racist by attacking white people.
Don't blame Brooklyn for this.
This
is a joke, and this is you being humorless.
Now, there's this article here about hiring a white man, making sure the office is diverse, accommodating the white guy at the Christmas party, listening to their complaints, celebrating the guy's culture. I think you can argue that this article is legitimate satire because it has something to say about tokenism, about quotas, about making a big deal about someone being different because they're totally not different. It doesn't matter that it's about a white man or not. It's about the ridiculousness of categorizing anyone as a different entity, as an other. But that is something that BuzzFeed so often does. Imagine if you had a list called 10 Things That Black People Ruined. Asian people are a plague on the planet. Join the revolution. Stop the Arabs. The article I showed you before about the white man is a provocative piece about treating people differently. These lists are racist. I'm not being humorless, they're shameful. Now, I think the argument for why this isn't racist, which I've come across not necessarily from BuzzFeed, but from people defending BuzzFeed, is that in the US, where BuzzFeed really is centered, white people have historically had the power. As a race in the US, they're richer. They were very racist historically, and to this day, some of them still are. All of that is true, but it doesn't matter. When senior writer for BuzzFeed Canada, Scotchy Cool, tweeted that BuzzFeed Canada was looking for pitches from mostly non-white, non-men, and that this wasn't racism but an attempt to fix all of history, she fell into the trap of fighting discrimination with discrimination. Have you ever fought fire with fire? You end up with fire. It doesn't matter who in the past oppressed who now as a race, if you want to categorize people like that, still oppresses who. Discriminating against people because of their race is racism. Discriminating against people because of their sex is sexism. I kind of feel like I shouldn't need to say this. I kind of feel like it's obvious. I know this is preachy, but I want to counter BuzzFeed's defense of this sort of language, the language of the other. BuzzFeed video is full of this. Things that only Jewish mothers say. How you know you're Asian American. How black people really talk. It mixes up culture and race. If people look alike, it doesn't mean they're going to speak alike. A race doesn't have a mindset. A culture does. This is basic. It perpetuates this sense of me and them. When you have a video that's called "If Black People Said the Things That White People Say," what you're really saying is white people are different to black people. It continues a divide. Now, I'm not saying that racial divides and perceptions shouldn't be discussed, but that they shouldn't be perpetuated. Often, in fairness to BuzzFeed, it does try to discuss these things in a more meaningful way. But I think even in these more meaningful videos, it often comes across as emotional, reactionary, and superficial. Take a look at this. 10 moments black people in the workplace know.
So, Martin Luther King Day is coming up. You got anything planned?
Do I have anything planned?
For The Office?
I've seen all 5 seasons, well, I've seen 3 seasons of The Wire, and...
But if I do want some chicken, do I look like a stereotype? Man, I just want some lunch. Why does this have to be so hard?
This isn't a serious comment about what black people experience in the workplace. It isn't even an edgy joke. It seems to be much more about people desperately trying not to seem racist, but in such an over-exaggerated way, the whole skit loses any point it could ever have had. This is where the derision for BuzzFeed comes from a double standard about discrimination, but also from being as watery as piss. It thinks that it's clever, that it's influencing the next generation, but the people who'll be running the liberal side of the world in the next 30 or 40 years, the people who are in their mid or early 20s now, they're not looking at BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed isn't influencing decision makers. It's influencing people who go on a lot of marches in their 20s and get a job at Allied Insurance in their 30s. And even then, I'm not sure influencing is the right word. BuzzFeed is something you grow out of. Hello, Allied Insurance. Hold, please. Now, I could go on. I could talk about the Why I Left BuzzFeed videos, made by vanilla people with nothing to say. I could talk about BuzzFeed's paid-for content, masquerading as just another list. But really, that's just BuzzFeed. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and tell me why you don't like BuzzFeed or why I just don't get it. Join me next time where I will be discussing homeopathy. Bit too weak. Better water it down. Hold, please. See you then.